Good morning, Dennis.
Thank you so much for your time today. And this is a long time coming about talking about couples. I know we have Valentine's Day coming up, but it's not exclusive to that holiday when couples get together, whether it's love and there's something good in the relationship, or it puts a lot of stress on them and you get breakups. But I wanted to talk more about couples in general, but we can include holidays too, because I think there is a stress point when we get to Valentine's Day and Christmas and Thanksgiving, when families are together, and a lot of stress on couples, whether you're together in the same city or whether you may be commuting to another city and seeing somebody long distance. But let's talk about holidays first. I've noticed when I was a younger person and I was dating that holidays were stressful. And as a guy, I felt a lot of pressure that a holiday was telling me what to do. Get flowers and candy for your girlfriend or your partner. This is what you have to do to make her happy. I've learned over the years that's not necessarily the case. I'm so happy about giving just because. And I think a lot of people do that, whether it's men, women, and your partners and all that. But why don't we talk about the stresses? And then we'll talk about some good points about the holidays too, and specifically Valentine's Day, because that's for the lovers.
Absolutely.
Tell me what you when it comes to the holiday and Valentine's Day and couples, tell me about maybe what you've experienced as far as expectations from both sides.
I think, like you describe, it's not uncommon I think actually both men and women can feel some responsibility to, what am I going to get my partner that I need to do something meaningful to indicate my care and love for this person on this day. And, let's be clear, it's a Hallmark holiday. And in one way, it's great that Hallmark helps us out with Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, all these holidays to help us make sure to honor people. And that's, I guess, the way that I would wish that people would think about it, that this is just a special day to make sure you do a good job honoring your partner, but that every day ought to be a day that you acknowledge that special person in your life.
Couldn't agree more. So my advice, and I think you're hearing that from Dr. Cindy as well, is that any day is a great day to acknowledge your partner and
Absolutely.
the special that they are. I did want to talk about couples in general, and I know we have 10 billion layers a week ago, so we'll just do our best in this 30 minutes on the Sunday morning to talk about relationships. But I noticed in my office, there are a lot of young people that are dating. Some of them are single and haven't been married before. Some have been married before. But the dating seems like a total nightmare. Now, when I was dating, there weren't apps, there wasn't social media, there wasn't internet. So if I met somebody, happened to be out at a bar, restaurant, or maybe happenstance at a sporting event or wherever, it just seemed to be a lot easier. But as I watch my TikToks and social media and talk to the young people and some of the other people in the office, the stresses that come with dating today, and the number one thing that I notice out of them, and I'd love you to expound on this, is that they know everything intimately about the person before they even have the first meeting and the date. And that strikes me as too much information and too weird. That sets up a conundrum that when you meet somebody, there's not that fun of enjoying about getting to know them with the Q&A. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think your point about it's kind of a jumpstart system, isn't it? Where you know all this ahead of time. In one way, that could be a really positive thing, that you already have your criteria of what you want. It could help you hone in better and notice what you want and be able to scan for what it is you really want. So it could be helpful in that process of, that you're not bothering with someone. For instance, on the app, it says, what are you looking for? Something short term or more of a long term relationship, right? So
Right.
if it's that kind of thing where you're deciding, oh, looks like this person is just looking to have fun, go out for an evening or something, and so I prefer not to spend my time with someone that way because I'm wanting more of a real long term relationship here. So those kinds of things are important, and not only that, differences in socioeconomic background, differences in education, differences, are you comfortable if someone is of another race or another cultural background? Do you feel like you need to be with someone, who comes from a similar family background? So some of these things can actually help you be more efficient about your dating and not waste time. Because one of the things that people talk about is the challenge of being out there dating and getting so burned out because you're meeting so many wrong people.
Mm-hmm.
And so this could give you that opportunity to not do that, to streamline it, to really use the information to help you zero in. Having said that, though, I still feel like there's plenty of opportunity when you meet someone. You know, what you see on paper is quite different than what you meet in person.
You talk to a lot of couples, and you've been married for a long time, and so have I. So we use our personal experiences, and then you get to, use your doctorate to talk to people every day when it comes to couples and partners out there. I imagine that things have changed over the last several decades. We already alluded to social media and internet and all sorts of different things. But as you're talking to couples today, I'm curious, when you meet them and maybe they have disagreements, they're seeing you, or there's something they need to solve with you when it comes to their partnership. Do couples have to have a lot in common? And before you answer that, I know that's a lot of hyperbole when you have a lot in common. I understand that, but I think you get my gist of that. Do couples have a lot in or can they grow together even though they might be vastly different?
You know, do they have to? I wouldn't say that that's a singular answer. I would say that, what works for two people is what's important. If somebody feels that they must have a lot in common, that they have to have all the same hobbies, for instance, as their partner, then they better go find that person. But there are plenty of people have different interests and some shared interests. And if there's mutual respect for that, then that works too. So there are lots of different ways to craft a partnership. The issue is, can you come together with someone who has a similar sensibility about all that you do?
I will be completely transparent, and I'm very proud of it. I've done counseling for myself and also in our marriage. And necessarily, it wasn't anything that was horrifyingly bad going on, but I just needed some help and wanted to talk to somebody. And I found them very beneficial. So I always recommend to people to talk to somebody and find the person, whether it's Dr. Cindy or anybody that makes you feel comfortable about talking about any issues or maybe working through something. But Dr. Cindy, as you talk to couples and partners, I imagine that communication comes up regularly, and it has with me and my wife, and I've been with her for 25 years. And, some of it is laughable. And I say that because it's funny about, communication with us and how we understand each other sometimes without even talking. Sometimes there's too much talking. Sometimes, are you listening to me? Or I ask, can you repeat that? And I don't want to put guys in a certain box or women in a certain box. But with that said, when it comes to communication and you talk to partners and couples out there, maybe expound a little bit on communication about what feedback you're getting from them and what advice you give them. I know there are a lot of different areas of communication, but just in general terms.
Well, I guess the way that I would put that is communication is a great heading, and underneath that falls so many subgroups of topics. So there's literal communication, which is, I'll meet you here. Somebody doesn't hear that, they meet you there, or they don't meet you at all. So there's that kind of communication.
Yeah.
Then there's indirect communication, which is like somebody alludes to something and the other person doesn't pick up the cue, and the person is disappointed that they didn't allude to it. So there's the kind of expectations, quiet expectations that are not voiced. So there's that, like, you should have known, why didn't you know that was important to me? And
Right.
in partnership, there should be some understanding of your partner that you would know some things about this person that you're with, that you would know some of the sensibilities that are important to them. Having said that, it's also important to be willing to be overt and clear, and your backgrounds make a lot of difference about this. For instance, one person in the partnership, birthdays may be nothing. The
Right.
other person, and they came from a big family and nobody ever did much for the birthday. Another person in the partnership, they were always really lauded and celebrated, and it's really important to them. So you better not treat your partner the way you want to be treated. You better treat your partner the way they want to be treated. And so that's a shared responsibility. So I'm talking about a shared responsibility for communication, both in terms of being overt and clear about what you want, but also about being willing to tune into your partner and understand what they need and want.
We obviously have both men and women listening to our conversation this morning, and I know this is a loaded question, and I know we could talk for hours about this, but do men and women listen and communicate differently?
I think they do. And I think that women often, not always, but often still kind of hold up the placard for, caring about couples communication, and that they're the ones that often, I work with a lot of couples that I often hear from the woman, not the man. Not always, though. Plenty of times men do too. I think men think of communication differently than women. And if you listen to women communicate, like if someone's communicating on the phone, women will talk to their friends for a long time, and communicating is about connecting. Men talk for the purpose of answering a question often. Now, again, not always. Some men are very interested in communicating and spending long times talking and learning about the other person. So it does vary, but there's sort of general gendered trends that go on with communication, I would say.
Right. And I want to speak to this a little bit more. And you and I can use our personal experiences, but it's for me, I'm pretty succinct about it. I'm answering a question or I'm fixing
Right.
something. I get right to the point. But I think guys deal with guys that way, but also they deal with women that way. Now we're talking about partners and men and women. There's all sorts of different relationships out there that we all experience. And for the people that are listening, when I've been through this before, and sometimes that there's a roadblock there about just what you described in general terms, not everybody, but in general terms. I wonder how you get past that as a couple and partners.
I think that both people have to be willing to speak up if something is not going well in the communication, and not
Right.
let things build up. That's often, I'd say that some
Well,
people.
let's stop there. Let's stop there because
Okay.
build up is what guys do, and I know I do it. I don't know if your husband does it, but because guys don't express their emotion like women do, and we hold it in, and not a lot of crying, not it's how we're brought up, da 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 da, and we're talking in general terms again. I think guys do that, and then it explodes after you've had enough of the same thing that's happening, which can lead to an argument and
Mhm.
strife and some really awkward situations with your partner out there. And, I don't think we have to go into why we do that, but I guess I'd like to ask you about when you talk to couples, when that guy is being built up with all that stuff in that partnership, what do you do at that point as a couple?
I think that when you've been building, 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 and then exploding, what does that tell you? You've been building up too long,
Yeah.
and that it would have been a lot better if you could say something sooner. Truth be told, a lot of men are not socialized to speak about their feelings. In fact, feelings are not a big focus for men still.
Yeah.
Yeah. If
Listen,
we if we if we go
I
back.
tested that.
Yeah, if we
Yeah.
go back to hunters and gatherers,
Yeah.
the men were out there, they were very point to point. They needed to get their thing done. Um, and some of those very, very old ideas about roles and gender are still there. And
Well, let's talk about.
I'm also not talking about just heterosexual couples.
Yeah,
I'm even talking about gay and lesbian couples,
sure.
transgender couples, that whatever your role is,
Mhm.
whether you take on them. Some people don't have male or female. Some people don't think of themselves. They're sort of non-gendered.
Right.
Um, but in many cases, these gender roles kind of infiltrate into the relationship. And so understanding that, I think, is really important, that having some self-awareness. And a big thing I would say is having some awareness of, how am I a pain in the neck in this partnership? And who would be the very best person to ask? Your
Yeah.
partner.
That's right. That's
And
right.
being willing to say, we're all a pain in the neck in our relationships. Anybody who knows us well knows what that is,
Yeah.
probably very well, and could tell you a lot about it.
Going to be the first one to raise my hand and say I am a pain in the butt, everybody. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Everybody is, though,
yeah.
if you're really being honest. And so understanding how you're difficult and really trying to lean in and notice that, and notice your partner. Tune into your partner. I always say that I think everybody should have an owner's manual on their partner. What are the things about your partner that you need to know?
Right.
What makes them happy? What makes them sad in the very most basic ways? Can you notice their reactions? And it's not all verbal. Some of it's nonverbal. Being able to be aware of, is this going well? It's not going well. Maybe we should shift, or maybe I should ask something if that's the case.
Right. Read the room, everybody.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and and by the way, I'm not joking about that. I mean, you need to do that and be self-aware. And that sometimes is a skill set that a lot of people don't have in a relationship, and that can be very hurtful. And just for the record, everybody, I'm going on 23 years of being a pain in the butt here in April. So just want to let everybody know.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so that's a long time to be a pain in the butt. I did want to talk a little bit more about gender roles, and once again, I want to make it very clear, and I know Dr. Cindy is too, that we're talking in general terms with all partners out there. And I'm curious about this.
And to be clear, we're talking in general terms because we can't make absolute statements. There's so many different variations on couples and how they relate. So some of what we're saying, somebody might not relate to or feel is relevant to them at all. And we may not be capturing all the different kind of feelings about the connections that people have with one another.
I'm glad you said the thousands of variants, everybody. I think we kind of know that, but I think we want to say it just so we're clear with everybody. I did want to ask you once again about gender roles. You talked to a lot of couples out there, I'm sure young couples and middle-aged and older couples out there. In your research and in talking with couples out there, once again, it's probably a loaded question. Do men ask too much of women, or do women in general ask too much of men, and that complicates a relationship?
I would say yes and yes. I would say that, what people think is reasonable. Everybody always thinks what they want and need is reasonable. They always think their perspective is reasonable. And it's not uncommon that the other party doesn't feel that way. And so like what might be easy for me might not be easy for somebody else. So I think I'm asking something reasonable, but maybe for that other person, it's a real stretch.
Right.
And so understanding that ends up being a really important thing, that we don't understand how other people experience some of what we're asking.
The other thing I've noticed in not only my relationship, but I talk to my friends and, I watch on social media that everybody uses the slang of love language. And I know you've heard that before.
Sure.
Somebody's love language is touching. Some of it is giving gifts. I happen to be that person giving gifts, but I'm also, touchy too. My wife not necessarily is, but she does a lot of other things that are her love language. That's wonderful, but it's different than me. And it took me a while to really understand that. And I'm not talking about months, everybody. I'm talking about years to really understand that as a partnership. About this is how my wife is. This is what her love language is. And I imagine that that's also a dynamic that takes a lot of other couples to really understand, Dr. Cindy, because there can be a misunderstanding about that. And I'll give you an example. If I give gifts to somebody on the holidays, and we talked about this at the beginning of our conversation, but the other person doesn't as much, or they don't remember the holidays like I do, or this person is in touchy-feely and likes to hug and cuddle a lot like I do, that really, it can come off as a hurtful thing, like a personal attack. And I wonder, when you talk to couples, how do you address that, and how do they get through that love language thing that might be so different for each other?
Well, I think, again, awareness, understanding, and a willingness to be vulnerable and be honest. When you didn't give me a gift for the holiday or acknowledge this holiday, it kind of hurt my feelings, and it made me worry that maybe you weren't caring for me. And then that person could say, first of all, acknowledging that other person's experience is very important. And then a willingness to say, now I know, and I promise to do better next year. And I'm sorry that I didn't respond, but please don't forget all the other ways I respond to show care. So I often say to couples, let's not get caught in needing something to be wrapped in a purple ribbon. What if it comes in a pink ribbon? Or what if there's no ribbon at all? But there's something very lovely that comes to you every day of your life. But on this particular holiday, it didn't happen just so. Or what if somebody never acknowledges birthdays, but they're incredible about so many other things? you know?
I would submit to you with that great explanation that 95% of couples out there and partners don't do what you just said.
I think you're
And
exactly right.
I'm just putting a guessing number out there. There's nothing scientific about what I just said. I want to make that very clear.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm using my own experiences, and I go back to what I said. And this is not exclusive to guys, everybody, about having your feelings hurt in a situation and clamping up and not telling them how you really feel, even though you would like to, and having it fester. And that creates, Dr. Cindy, those complications about, well, that person hurt my feelings on this. And then 6 months later, something different happened, and I want to say something, but I don't. And that's where it gets into a real complication with relationships of something festering that you didn't tell somebody, your partner, the one that's closest to you in your life, that my feelings are really hurt or I misunderstood, and bearing your soul to them. And I think it's a real complication with partners out there and couples in general that don't do what you exactly said. I think that's a learned behavior that takes many years to understand.
Well, I think a lot of people spend more time protecting themselves and a lot less time being vulnerable. And
I agree.
when you feel hurt, you don't want to be vulnerable. But when you hold it in and make assumptions about things that happen without really checking it out and being willing to take the risk to be vulnerable, things get worse, not better. So you
Right.
perceive something, you draw your own conclusions, and you retreat in some way, whether you retreat into anger or whether you retreat into just silence. Either way, it doesn't allow for that connection to be rerouted. And so this part is really important. People connect in vulnerability. They don't connect in what I call secondary feelings. So secondary feelings are more like irritability, defensiveness, anxiety, frustration. Vulnerable feelings are more like sadness, hurt, fear. So when people can be more honest about those underlying feelings, we protect with our secondary feelings. And most people, almost all the time, live in their secondary feeling realm, not the underlying fear, more core feelings that are underneath, because it's scary to come forward and be
It,
vulnerable. That's what vulnerability is all about. But that's when people connect, and that's how it happens.
And once again, I'll just use my own experiences, the vulnerability. And I think just growing up as a dude, and guys can relate to me, that we don't do that. We don't share because we weren't taught to do that emotionally. And I just think, and whether it's guy and guy or guy and gal or partners, trans, all couples, we're talking about all couples here. But especially from my personal experiences, I'm talking about as a guy, it's a learned behavior with me, and it's something I didn't do for years that hurt me in relationships, even in my current one early on. I learned to get past that with some therapy and also having a very understanding wife. But I got to say, Dr. Cindy, when it comes to guys, we're really stunted in a lot of areas. And I imagine that couples, I always joke that we're big dumb animals, and we're pretty simple on how to be pleased with a little food and a nice show and just a compliment and being acknowledged. But and I'm half joking, and the other half I'm not joking about that. But I don't know how to get past that for a lot of people, because if we do what we do, I know for a lot of couples that eventually will end up in divorce because that guy couldn't be honest, and it did stunt the relationship of communication. I imagine you deal with that all the time, that somebody didn't want to participate. I don't know if it's the guy mostly, but it's somebody who wasn't able to offer and be vulnerable, like you talked about, and share the honesty and the feelings that we've never been taught to do.
And I want to be careful not just to be blaming men, because women too can be challenged to be available to participate and talk about things.
I'll blame men. Dr. Cindy one, I'll blame men. I'll I'll take one for the team here.
um, I guess I would just say that, the divorce rate is really pretty high these days.
Yeah, it is.
And yet people want partnership, because what you see is, even though the divorce rate is high for first marriages, second marriages, it's even higher, but people are still trying to partner out there. So it's like, then let's step back and take a look at this and say, everybody seems to want to connect, or at least a lot of people do. And there's a lot to be said, Dennis, for partnership. People live longer when they have partners, truly, and they're healthier longer. So one might say, maybe we're not meant to be alone. And And I also want to be clear, you can live a happy, solid life alone too, and single. And there are plenty of people who are choosing to be single. So I don't want to say that that can't be a good thing. Whether you're in a partnership though, or whether you're single, people need people. And being totally isolated doesn't work well.
Right. This is going to probably have to be for another conversation. That's always
Yes,
when Dr. Cindy and I talk about these
right.
things, that another topic comes up for another episode, which is lovely. And I like that. But I am noticing, and once again, I'm on talking about social media, so it's just a small sampling, mind you. But I'm hearing a lot of guys saying, I'd rather be by myself, women, and this is general terms what I'm watching on social media. And the women talk about it getting at that high value man that makes so much money, that does this for a living. And this is my lifestyle that I want to have, and married and children, da, 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 da. And some guys say, that the bar is set so high for them, the frustration out there of meeting women, there's only a small percentage of men that are actually getting with these women. And it complicates things for a real nice guy who might be stuck in the friend zone, or he might not be noticed, even though he makes a good money, he's educated, but he doesn't fit all of that criteria of that high valued man that young women are looking for. So once again, another topic for another day, but maybe if you could just maybe be brief about this, about maybe today's scene and all that's going on there, about maybe guys deciding they want to be alone.
Well, I think that does happen. I think it's a sad thing that
Yeah.
men that are maybe a little quieter, or um, maybe a little bit less confident socially, but they're lovely human beings. And, everybody's got their sights on one sort of person and missing out on some lovely people. And those people end up deciding that, they just can't be successful, and drawing that conclusion. And I guess what I want to say is that there's a lid for every pot. That if people want to be in partnership, they can find it, and to not give up on love, because there's a lot that's really lovely. It's hard work, and let's not forget that. Just because you fall in love initially and everything looks really rosy at the beginning, to keep it healthy and solid, you have to work it. And that's how it is people have long relationships. I think a lot of people think, if I'm not happy, then maybe I'm in the wrong relationship. And if you're not happy, first of all, it's not up to your partner to make you happy. And second of all, understanding what that's about and working with your partner to figure out what to do about it is a much better way to go than to just dispose of that person because they're not immediately meeting all your needs. And no other person can meet your needs and make you happy.
I'm going to challenge Dr. Cindy on one thing about the lid analogy. That might be true, but a lot of those lids don't fit correctly.
You're right. And that has to do with expectations.
Yeah.
That has to do with
Yeah.
expectations, because if people believe that that other person is supposed to meet their every need, then no wonder they think that lid doesn't fit correctly, right?
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's well said too. So listen, we only have about a minute left. So I want you to talk to everybody about what you do, if they ever like to reach out to you in just a second. But I think we came up with a couple more topics down the road in 2023 that we'll be able to chat about.
Absolutely.
But I've learned a lot, and I like talking to you about these things because, I've been in a long-term relationship, and a lot of our listeners have too, or there's people that's looking for the right person. I hope we help them with a little bit of free advice today. So, but if they want some professional stuff, how do they get a hold of you, Dr. Cindy?
Cynthia Post, PhD.com.
Outstanding. Well, thank you so much for your time. And I
Thank
think
you.
I've got a couple of topics in my head for next time.
Okay, wonderful.
And I think we'll have some fun conversations. But thank you always for joining us on Community DC. It's always been a lot of fun. And take care. And we'll talk to you very soon.
Thank you so much, Dennis. It's always a pleasure talking with you.